Hello everyone, welcome back to another rant. This is a topic that has been frustrating me for some time, and it's monetization in the gaming industry. I grew up playing games in the 90s and the early 2000s, back before the existence of battle passes, microtransactions, and day one DLC. Games were expensive, but you at least knew that when you bought a game, you got the complete experience. Developers didn't remove bits and pieces of their games in hopes of selling it back to you for more money. There were some downsides, sure, but I don't think most people nowadays understand how predatory and anti-consumer monetization has gotten. It all started with that damn horse armor from Oblivion. What would have been an unlockable or a reward for an achievement or quest was now locked behind $2.50 for a game you already bought. Who would actually spend $2.50 for a single piece of cosmetic content? Most people mocked it at the time, but this was a pivotal moment for gaming culture and was an omen for the things to come. It should have been obvious that a fanbase filled with passionate and obsessive people wouldn't mind it, especially when for a ton of them, this is their only hobby. Once the shock value wore off, game publishers began to push the envelope, and boy did they push. In the East, Korea and China were the first to push the freemium and microtransaction model. They would primarily sell consumables, skins, and experience and gold bonuses. Some of them did sell direct power, and some of them even used renting models where items, skins, and bonuses expired, requiring players to repeatedly purchase them if they wanted to continue using them. Nexon's combat arms immediately comes to mind. You had to rent not only skins, but also the weapons you actually used. If you didn't play and earn enough GP or gear points, you had to play with the default weapon, which was I think an M14, and it was boring and honestly it was really bad. The only way to get a permanent weapon was to purchase it with NX or their premium currency. I was a teenager at the time, so I tried to play as much as possible to maintain my loadout of choice, but it definitely bothered me that the moment I decided to play any other game, returning to combat arms would cost me. I met some great people in that game, so I don't have that many regrets, but it definitely left a sour taste in my mouth and made me doubt any FPS game developed and published in the East. Around the same time, MapleStory was also seeing massive success, and many others under Nexon's game catalog. And it wasn't just Nexon. Other publishers, such as Aria Games and Iji, also followed the same playbook. Aria Games were so heavy-handed with their monetization that they were infamous for publishing new MMOs all the time because they'd milk them as hard as possible while the hype was at its peak, and then quickly abandon them the moment the whales had nothing else to wail for. But where is Nexon now? Well, call it anecdotal, but most people I know from the West don't even play any Nexon games, even if they had played them in the past. Interestingly, however, is that Nexon rakes in more money now than at the height of their relevancy in the Western gaming sphere. Much more. In the West, most publishers were still too scared to jump onto the microtransaction train. Most continued selling full games but would now offer promises of paid expansions in the future. Others, like EA, would establish packs with a bundle of themed items as DLC for games like The Sims. I'd say most Western developers were keen to take advantage of the income that the microtransaction model would bring, but were waiting for the West to become acclimated to what the Eastern publishers were doing. Subscriptions were a popular stepping stone that a lot of games, especially MMOs, used before following the East. Games like World of Warcraft, RuneScape, and Tibia are just a few I can name off the top of my head that offered a free demo, but required a monthly subscription to get the full experience. Expansions were also quite common, charging players for content updates for games they had already bought. Most of these were pretty fair in my opinion, and I didn't have any major gripes with their monetizations besides being a broke teenager. Other games like Counter-Strike Source were mostly community driven, allowing for the ongoing development of maps, modes, skins, and servers to fall on the community. I remember going to FPS Banana and downloading a bunch of skins for all the guns that I wanted. I remember downloading custom maps, configs, and scripts for my own server. I remember participating in CEVO and Cal Leagues, idling IRC for scrims with other teams in the middle of the night, and browsing the popular HLTV forums for any major Counter-Strike news. I thought this was the future of gaming, where developers could sell you the base game with all the tools and capabilities to continue development based on the community's own interests. Sadly, it has gone the exact opposite direction. Free-to-play was a massive cultural shift in both how players chose which games to play and how gaming companies viewed monetization. This was around the time that software as a service, or SaaS, became the big buzzword in the tech world. Instead of paying for Photoshop, Fruity Loops, FL Studio now, or Sony Vegas, companies thought, why not charge them for temporary access instead? These were powerful pieces of software that were primarily made for professionals, and their price reflected it. Instead of paying $600 for Photoshop, Adobe opted to charge a monthly subscription instead. Customers would no longer own the software and could lose access to the software if they didn't keep up with the payments. Their profits soared, and many other companies took notice. In the gaming world, free-to-play or live service is our version of SaaS. The companies gave players the product for free, but tied game content as an optional purchase. This allows more players to play the game, which is always a good thing, and allows the companies to charge for things in an ongoing fashion. As they develop content for the game, they unlock more potential revenue from their player base. And since the game is free, it's more likely to have a larger amount of players. Remember earlier when I mentioned that gamers have a large amount of passion for the games that they play? Well, they also don't seem to look at the price tags for these microtransactions. Oblivion charged $2.50 for their horse armor, and it was laughed at, but suddenly paying $30 for a set of wings is acceptable. Almost every game I've played that makes money off of microtransactions charges a decent chunk of change for their cosmetics nowadays. And I don't think a lot of people take into account the value proposition if they were to compare it to other things or even other games. I can buy Black Myth Wukong for $60, a game with multiple years of development, gorgeous graphics and animations, environments, story, and combat. Or I can buy a set of armor on Path of Exile. A single set of armor. But you don't get it, Rant. The game is great and I played it for hundreds or thousands of hours, which means I'm actually getting a great flying fuck. I've gotten thousands of hours out of games worth as little as $10 or $20. I want to support the games that I play and enjoy, as I know they will fail without support, especially if they're live service games. I do not, however, believe that microtransactions should be macro transactions. But hey, it's your money, do what makes you happy with it. I'm just sick and tired of gamers as a whole accepting this new norm. Companies do not have to charge obscene prices for cosmetics, but the gaming community as a whole is signaling that it's okay, and it's only going to get worse. Let's take a look at a few examples from games I've recently played. League of Legends recently got rid of hex-tech crafting, which allowed players a way to get random skins for free by simply playing the game, similar to Overwatch. This has caused an uproar within the League community, especially since they try to gaslight players into believing they would receive the same amount of content in the new Battle Pass system. This was a provable lie, and Riot eventually posted a response claiming that their old system was too generous and hurting their business, that it compromised League's sustainability.
League has also been pretty stable over time too, ensuring we have an equally sustainable income coming in to reinvest in the game. However, has been frankly more of a recent challenge.
And that's where free hectic shifts come in.
So we took a step back.
Take a big step back and literally fuck your own face!
You don't have to be a genius to see through the bullshit. How is it hurting their business when Riot has made billions in profit every year, and the player base has grown since 2016 when the system was first implemented? League of Legends was Riot Games' only source of revenue generation for roughly 10 years. They made so much money, it funded not only League development, but also Valorant, Teamfight Tactics, Legends of Runeterra, 2XKO, and a bunch of other projects that were cancelled or currently in development like the League MMO. If hex-tech crafting was actually making the game unsustainable, they would have reverted it years ago with how precious their golden goose would have been for the company with no other product. I asked DeepSeek about it since Riot doesn't reveal their internal numbers, and it suspects the same as anyone with a brain would, that this is purely a greedy move being presented as one out of necessity. And if that wasn't bad enough, the previous year they introduced gacha skins to the game. Gacha skins are one of the big pillars of anti-consumer monetization practices. Whales don't care about price tags, but definitely care about exclusivity. And instead of making a game for everyone, they're going to begin focusing on the few, just like every other game that goes down this route. Path of Exile is one of the best games I've ever played, and one I would say would not exist if it wasn't for all the dedicated hardcore fans that supported them from the beginning. I've been playing since I bought a key for their beta, and I think in 2009 or 2010. And while I do appreciate GGG's work, their costs are extremely heavy and rely on the, well, I enjoy the game so much, I'm not actually buying a skin, I'm supporting them argument. That needs to die. GGG have outgrown their grassroots phase. They do not need to signal that their microtransactions are purchases made out of unconditional support. But they still do, because how else would anyone justify paying $64 for a pair of wings or $46 for a cloak? These are prices of AAA or AA games for a single cosmetic item. It's not just the prices either, but functionality that should be in the game is being locked away behind paywalls. I can't imagine anyone playing Path of Exile with the default tabs given. You can't rename them, recolor them, or use them for trade, which is fucking insane with how important it is in Trade League. The map and currency tabs save you so much time, and it's such a quality of life. I feel like they should just come with the base game itself. Gem tabs, flask tabs, map tabs, blight tabs, breach tabs, fragment tabs, quad tabs, currency tabs, essence tabs, delve tabs, delirium tabs, and a unique tab. If you think it could have a tab, it probably does. They even sell things that should straight up be in your video or graphics settings. The invisible buff effect is per aura, which means if you run a build with 8 auras and you want to be able to see your character, that's $40 to turn them off. And then what about flasks? Well, they have one for the flask that costs $3.50 for each flask. Again, I love Path of Exile and GGG in general, but the pricing and function of some of these microtransactions seems a little much. I'd be fine if it was just expensive and they just priced me out in order to milk the whales. But some things push beyond quality of life and are so impactful that without them, you might as well be playing a demo. Counter-Strike 2 is a weird one for me. On one hand, gambling boxes are awful and shouldn't be encouraged, but on the other hand, I've never seen such cheap skins for a game. I built out an entire loadout of skins I liked for about $3, and I can resell them if I ever get bored. You can also loot skins and crates from just playing the game. Even if a ton of them are only worth a few cents, it's still nice to have. I guess this system is awful if you only care about the rarity of a skin, because you'll probably be spending quite a chunk of change per skin. Thankfully, I don't, so most of the skins are extremely cheap for me. Just don't think about ever changing your knife skin. Lastly, and I'm shocked this game rarely gets mentioned as an example of anti-consumer monetization, but it's so egregious that it solidified my fear that gamers will eat shit and the practices will only get worse, and that game is Valorant. Valorant has by far the worst monetization outside of directly selling an I win button. I need to break down their systems for those who have never played it to really emphasize how bad it is. Valorant uses 3 different currencies in relation to unlockables. These are Kingdom Credits, Radianite, and VP. Kingdom Credits are used to unlock agents and some other small things like trinkets, sprays, and banners. Radianite is used to unlock features for skins that you buy. VP is strictly bought with real money. Players can earn Kingdom Credits by playing the game but are capped at 10,000 credits. This means that Riot has artificially limited how much a player can stockpile. This is to encourage players to spend VP when unlocking a new agent, because if players could stockpile a bunch of it, they would have no reason to spend real money. Additionally, it makes their limited content offerings that are rotated harder to save for, because if you want a specific item that isn't rotated yet, you will hold on to the credits until the item shows up, meaning you're foregoing other content. Valorant Points, or VP, is used to buy cosmetics, primarily skins. Riot offers players a select few skins for purchase, meaning that if you miss the release of some skin you like, you're absolutely screwed until it manages to find its way back into the shop. And you better be ready to buy it, because it won't be there long, and as more skins get made, the chance of your skin returning gets lower. This creation of FOMO serves no purpose to the customer, and strictly tries to prey on consumer sensibilities and psychology. But wait, there's more! Besides what I would consider really bad value for your buck, you also don't get everything when you purchase skins with effects. Depending on the skin, you're spending anywhere from 10 to 30 Radianite for each effect on the weapon, and another 15 Radianite for each variation or recolor, but only after spending enough Radianite to unlock all the effects first. Riot gives you about 30 Radianite upon completing the Battle Pass, and another 30 for completing the Epilogue. They do this so that free players that grind the game accumulate Radianite that might push them to purchase a skin since they have a stockpile of otherwise worthless currency. And on the flip side, players who may not have the time to play the game but have more money than sense will have another way to drop more money. Also, fuck Riot for pricing knife skins as a luxury just because Counter-Strike does, while ignoring the entire reason they are so expensive, which is that there's a whole player economy and rarity from the cases. The only positive thing about Valorant monetization is the lack of loot boxes, but that's something I'm sure they're considering since they've made their introduction in TFT and League of Legends. But here's the whole reason I even made this video. Valorant is one of the most successful games around, and it's not just Valorant. Gacha games like Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact have been huge successes in the West, whereas 20 years ago they would have been a laughingstock. This trend of accepting terrible monetization practices because the game happens to be enjoyable is equivalent to Stockholm Syndrome. These games would still exist with better consumer-friendly monetization, but they have no pressure to change because the majority of spenders do not care. And I don't see this changing anytime soon, and instead, it's probably going to get worse. The new generation of gamers doesn't even remember what paying for a full experience is like, let alone grinding for skins through achievements or challenges. So now the average gamer suffers as game devs and publishers focus on milking the group that has no sense of value or way too much money. Publishers are frothing at the mouth for the release of GTA 6 just because they hope it breaks the $70 price tag barrier and pushes the norm even higher. And if Rockstar decides to charge $100 for GTA 6, I don't have faith that the gaming community would resist. And every AAA going forward would be $100. I still have hope for some games, but they're usually indie games. Games like Valheim, Core Keeper, Palworld, Balatro, Factorio, just to name a few. They seem to be the big innovators and the best value for your money, and I wish the devs all the success. That's it for this rant. Thanks again for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Rant over.